Now I just want to go on record by saying I fucking love Jason Graves.
Yeah, that's me. I'm a little angry at the moment. You might be wondering how I got here. Well, normally I end the video with this, but there's no time like the present. 71 hours! Almost 72. But let's back up and let ol' J1KG tell you a tale. You know Fire Emblem, right? Long-running Nintendo strategy RPG series, infamously didn't leave Japan until the Game Boy Advance, and that's where my knowledge of the series essentially started. Before the title we simply know as Fire Emblem, there were in actuality 6 names before it, with 3 of them releasing on the Super Famicom. What's weird are the release years, 94, 96, and 99? And it technically didn't retail until 2000, before it was merely a downloadable game for your Nintendo Power Flash cart. No relation to the magazine. This game wasn't on shelves until the year 2000 for the Super Famicom. Intelligent Systems must have hated the Nintendo 64. I thought I knew what Fire Emblem was all about. I've beaten most of the games that came out here. The GBA ones, all the ones for the 3DS, had a blast with 3 houses, but I was not prepared. This is not your cute eating cupcakes with your girlfriend, having a LARP in school, no, let's kiss and hold hands Fire Emblem. No, this game is ghoulishly hardcore. Old Fire Emblem wears you down emotionally. They're calculating monsters. If you give them an inch, one of your party members is dead. Whether or not you get through Fire Emblem Mystery of the Emblem is contingent on how patient you can be, for 2 main reasons. Firstly, it's so slow. You need to individually move each one of your units one by one. You need to manually move items from character to character. You need to wait for the enemy to move their units one by one. And on top of this, by default, there are battle animations. I can't imagine anyone beating this without turning them off. Larger chapters easily surpass the hour mark with them turned off, and there's 42 chapters in here. In the past, I have digested some sluggish, janky, slow games. Dungeon Master, Uncharted Waters. Hell, Uncharted Waters is one of my favorite games of all time now, and it's the only title I played more of after finishing my video. So I can handle prolonged, clunky, draining experiences. But what kills my morale more than anything else in all of video gaming is losing progress. Playing old Fire Emblem is to repeatedly lose progress. It's basically what these games are all about. If you didn't know, when a character is defeated in battle, unlike in Shining Force or the newer Fire Emblems, your character is dead for good, which is fine. My old basketball coach used to have a saying, next man up. What makes losing a unit so heartbreaking, and most of the time unacceptable, is how the experience system works, which means that you can't grind at any sort of random encounters, with the exception of the Coliseum, which is risky because your character can get screwed by the random enemy RNG and die in an instant. Some of these encounters are more powerful than the enemies in the final chapter. Using the Coliseum is also risky because the best time to try and use it is when all the enemies are already defeated and you essentially have the battle locked up. You wouldn't want to wait to do it before, because then you run the risk of something going wrong during the chapter and having to reboot, rendering your time spent grinding lost. Yet if you do it at the end, you run the risk of your character dying, having to redo the entire chapter. What I'm getting at is that there's almost a set pool of EXP to go around, so you need to pick and choose which units to invest in extraordinarily carefully. It's bizarre. Enemy units become one of your most valuable commodities. On top of that, assigning EXP is sort of like a soft lottery. Sometimes your character turns into a great knight, other times they suck ass no matter what you do. The only way to know if they're going to be good or not is to invest in them. You'll end up with far more units than you could feasibly use, and there is a great deal of choice you'll have when building a team. But all of this together means that when a character dies, you cannot have a next man up mentality, despite having plenty of unused units, because not only does your character die, so do all of the resources you poured into them. When an important character dies, you can't naturally get that experience back, so you're going to be doing a lot of this. Resetting in the middle of a battle. Oh yeah, and Marth can't die or it's an instant game over. Playing old Fire Emblem games is to rehearse the same fight over and over until you can do it without any casualties. Most of the time, there's no way you're pulling off a flawless victory on your first attempt. There is no way to know which way a fight is going to go unless you've already tried it once, twice, who knows how many times. Take this simple map for example. At first it appears you need to tiptoe this thin strip of land around all the buildings to ambush the boss in this room. Sure, there is a bridge, but it's out, meaning there's probably a switch somewhere we need to hit so our other units can invade. I put this plan into action and whoops! Actually, you can't do that because Pegasus Knights show up as reinforcements, ambushing you halfway there. Units showing up as reinforcements are common and expected, but what genuinely sets my piss ablaze is they move the same turn they appear. Enemies can show up unannounced and kill you all in one turn. Okay, so we can't do that. After a reset or two, hopefully you have figured out that a thief can lower the bridge, and you can simply do the chapter like normal. Here's another example. As I cross this narrow passage to the west, these dragon riders look like they're ready to pounce, so I get into a defensive formation and carefully cross. Only they don't attack. I think it's a little weird, but it must just be a story thing. If they're not bothering me, then I'm not going to bother them. After all, there are other examples in the game of enemy units not being hostile unless provoked. So I ignore them until I cross this bridge and they suddenly attack. I didn't know that this was going to happen, so somebody dies and it's another restart. I do the chapter again and this time I'm ready, and they aren't attacking. It turns out they're aggroed by visiting the armory, so don't go to the store, or at least build a protective wall before you do. These are only two small examples of unpredictability. There are much larger fights with things like this going on much grander and time-consuming scales. Remember how slow everything moves? How would you like to replay the same battles over and over again with some of the slowest combat on the Super Nintendo? Getting to the stage boss after struggling for over an hour only to have someone die a cheap death is not fun. The worst offender is the last chapter of the game, which admittedly isn't all that hard, but it is an endurance. It's essentially 3 chapters back to back to back, all crammed into one, meaning that if you lose any of these 3 fights, you go back. Here I am about to land the finishing blow on the final boss. See this 30 down here? That means that the enemy has a 30% chance of hitting me. A little bit less than 1 in 3. And in this situation, if the other 70% comes through and it misses, then I counterattack, and with my 100 accuracy, it means that I would win the game, and I can put all of this behind me. No more restarts, no more rehearsing. One more hit and I can start making this video. So yeah, that's how I got here.
God damn it.
Let's have a look at our how long to beat screen again. What's this? Poser Gene out here striking again. Let's back up and tell y'all the story of my own stupidity. Fire Emblem Mystery of the Emblem is divided into 2 separate halves, or books as they're dubbed. Book 1 is a Super Mario All-Stars style remake of the first Fire Emblem, which only less than a year ago finally came out in America on the Switch, but not on the NES Online. It has since been delisted. I love you, Nintendo. I bought it day one, played a few chapters, thought, gee, this is neat, but it's also impenetrably slow, and I do not want to pour my time into this. Well, life found a roundabout way to get me to play Fire Emblem 1. The final boss of Book 1 is this dragon guy. His defenses are stupid high, and for all intents and purposes, you need the special plot sword to do any damage. If you don't have the sword, he's basically invulnerable. Okay, no big deal, right? How do you get the sword? Well, through a multi-step, sort of convoluted side quest that admittedly the game did convey as important. I'm willing to accept 60% of the blame on this one, if the game is willing to admit that it's an easy quest to fuck up. The sword is in the possession of this guy named Garnet, who is an enemy in another chapter. He's invincible to everything except one spell, and unusually for this game, you are not required to defeat him to win the chapter. Most of the time, in fact every single time except 2, I counted, including this one, the enemy boss is standing on your objective, meaning you need to defeat him to move on. Garnet is a roaming enemy, one which is only hurt by one spell, that you can merely walk around. To get the only spell that hurts him, you need to save this specific village from bandits. The game has a plethora of villages. Some of them give you money, others items, once in a while a new recruit. The way it works, to claim your reward, you need to guide Marth, and only Marth can interact with them, onto the tile before these enemy thief units come and destroy them. This one instance, which happens to also be the hardest village to protect in the whole game, has the crucial spell you need to beat the guy who has the sword. You need to kill the dragon to beat the game. Not only that, but you need 2 orbs to get this spell, and that's where I messed up. There's an earlier chapter with a bunch of treasure chests. Chests work almost the same way as villages. You need to get there before the thieves do to get the items inside. Going into the chapter, I knew that I needed 2 orbs. The game tells me specifically which ones, but my stupid monkey ADHD brain only internalized 2 orbs, but didn't retain the specifics of which 2 orbs they were. It turns out this chapter contains 3 orbs. Not only the 2 that you need, but a third dummy orb, which does nothing. Being the video game poser that I am, I picked up the dummy orb and thought my work here was done, only to realize chapters later that I can't get the spell. At this point, I absconded to GameFAQs, hoping to see if my save was locked or not, to which they seemed to think the final boss would be difficult, but still entirely possible. Ha, well, it wasn't. Not to me anyway. I had the dragon surrounded, but none of my units could do any damage. There was nothing I could do. And it's not like you can replay chapters to fix your mistakes, so my run was over. After that ordeal, I took a deep breath and did what I had to do. Restarted the entire game from the beginning, lofting over 24 hours of playtime into the dumpster. Normally it wouldn't be so devastating because I rotate saves, but in Fire Emblem Mystery of the Emblem, it doesn't ask you which save file to use. All it does is ask you if you want to save, yes or no. Yes overwrites whatever file you selected on the main menu. Because of this, I had one save that was permanently fucked, and there was nothing I could do about it. If you haven't lost respect for me already, this next bit might do it. I have a confession. I am a fan of Fire Emblem. I've bought every game in the series of the last 10 years the day they came out, played through all of them, yet could not tell you a single thing about the story in any of them. I never got the appeal. When I play a Fire Emblem game, I skip every cutscene, hardly read any of the character interactions, and scarcely, generally don't pay attention to the plot. I play these games like an improved version of the board game Risk. If you couldn't tell, yes, I do prefer the Advanced Wars series. For this video, I made a special exception. For the sake of my channel, I did pay attention. Before every chapter, there's a narration setting up your battle, then there's a short character dialogue before and after every scrape. I read all of it, then I rewatched my footage and reread all of it again. And you know what? I've got to admit, this shit puts me to sleep. I was not won over one iota. In book 1, there's a war. then you win the war. That's truly about it in the broadest strokes. Sure, there's an ancestor, which used to be a legendary hero, and a dragon in there somewhere, but it's not like it's anything that hadn't been done to death 1,000 times. Book 2 is the added element of old friends being in conflict with each other, but at the end of the day, it directly amounts to some evil guys wanting to revive another dragon. Then they do. Then you kill it. There's also this brainwashing thing with a group of your female former party members thrown in at the 70th hour. In the final battle, they act like white mages helping the final boss. You can save them by talking to them with the appropriate party members, but fuck that. I didn't invest into any of the characters which can talk sense into them, so I slaughtered them. Not like it affects the ending or anything. I'm not dragging 4 worthless bodies through the last 2 battles just to have a chance at saving these girls. At this point, I'd been playing this for 70 hours and was ready for it to be over. You're also collecting orbs to put into your Fire Emblem. That's right, the series' namesake, which we get the backstory on here. So why is the series called Fire Emblem? In this game, we learn it's a shield used to seal away evil dragons. But that's only its story purpose, which, as established, I could care less about. It's an item in your inventory as well, and do you want to know what it does? Lets you open chests. Yeah, the thing this entire series is named after lets you open chests without a key. Don't get me wrong, that is useful, but it's also a little underwhelming, wouldn't you say? It's sort of a shame I grew to be so sick of this. Mystery of the Emblem is one of those giant, juicy challenge stakes where if you eat the whole thing, you get it for free. It's a great game. Yet all I've done is complain. It's designed to live in your Super Famicom for a year, maybe longer, not to be binge played in about a month. I will say, Book 2 is much more forgiving than Book 1, and you can select it from the main menu at any time. You don't need to beat Book 1 to play Book 2. In fact, if you're going to play this, I'd encourage you to skip 1. Book 2 is faster paced, it didn't seem to involve as much trial and error. It's commendable, they were able to fit 2 full-length games into 1 cartridge, but it's too much. Just thinking about playing Fire Emblem again is making me sick. It's a good thing I have something like 39 SNES RPGs to get to before the next one, because I think I'd go mad having to put myself through something like this again so soon. Anyway, never trust anyone who needs a haircut. Goodbye.